See, Carrie is like a good attorney. She knows the answer to the question. She never asks a question where she doesn't know the answer. So I will give her the answer now that she knows. I think Ed Mitchell is telling the absolute truth.
Okay, now this answer I don't know.
Ah, so she didn't know the answer.
No.
Because she hasn't read that part of Dark Mission.
That's right.
The reason, the resolution of this paradox is that Ed Mitchell has had something happen to his mind.
Oh, that answer I did know. Okay.
The astronauts, I believe, have been tampered with.
Yes.
There are all kinds of papers now coming out in the open literature about technologies which can selectively wipe out your memories on specific events. And I believe, and I have in the book, Mike and I carefully put in document after document after document of reference to all of the astronauts at one time or another have complained about not being able to remember what they did on the moon.
Yes,
and they come up with various rationales.
Yes.
You know, like some of them, like Pete Conrad, used to come up with a flip answer. Oh, it was real super gee whiz, golly boy, was it great. Which was a cover for the fact that he was very frustrated in private conversations, on the record with certain reporters, that he couldn't remember. We had a conference in Wyoming several years ago. Wyoming is a hotbed of CIA and ex-Intel guys who are all bought big, beautiful farms and ranches so they'll keep their mouth shut. They're basically bought off. That's how they're bought off. I was invited to present data on Mars by one of these former CIA big rancher types who had a very beautiful wife who happened to be a medical doctor. Without mentioning names, because they're still alive and I would like to keep them alive, things got really, really, really weird. Because I was ostensibly invited to present the Mars data, Cydonia, our work, at the UN, our expose and the NASA briefings, at NASA Lewis on Mars. And suddenly, I surprised them by presenting a whole bunch of stuff for the first time on the moon. And this individual freaked out.
Oh, wow.
And his wife, who it turned out had been one of the doctors who had debriefed the astronauts, the crew, she orbited around the conference, never even coming in, talking to some of the people who were there with us and saying, I don't know why this is so disturbing, but I just can't sit through this. So it's the old who watches the watchers. Even, I believe, she had her mind altered so she would not remember the truth after she had done. So how far up the chain does this go? How many watchers have they had to change their minds with some technology? And the technology is not perfect. I think we're seeing evidence that the technology again and again breaks down. If you read, for instance, Buzz Aldrin's first-person testimony in his own books, he talks about how Jay Barbary, who was a colleague of mine from NBC News, I knew Jay back when I was with Cronkite. I was just a young whippersnapper, and Jay is now this senior space correspondent still covering the shuttle for NBC, asking very perceptive questions from the press corps. Jay innocently invited Buzz to I think it was a Kiwanis Club meeting up in Palmdale, which is one of the NASA facilities north of Los Angeles, where they, in fact, have tested a lot of the components of the secret space program and the secret military program, including the shuttle. And so he invites him into this meeting, a whole bunch of rah-rah, jet jockeys and engineers, and, the old slap you on the back, good old boy network. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And he asks, they're sitting on stage, and they got two chairs, and it's like very conversation. And he says to Buzz, Jay asked Buzz, well, what did it feel like to walk on the moon for the first time? And in his own book, Buzz Aldrin says that at that moment he became violently ill. He had to rush off the stage. He went out to the alley and he threw up.
Wow.
And his wife came out all upset because she thought something was seriously wrong, which of course it was. This is classic aversion therapy. Classic aversion therapy. So yes, I believe the astronauts are blameless. All except for Neil Armstrong.
Okay.
I think Neil Armstrong fully has his memories. I think Neil Armstrong, as the icon, first person of the human family now to walk on the moon, has been left alone. And that is why Neil Armstrong never says anything in public about the space program. They wind him up and bring him out at a couple of these ceremonies. Like in 1994, he was at the White House with President Clinton and a bunch of students, and it was a whole arranged photo op. And he stands there making a speech, and I had someone the other night analyze the body language and his voice and talk about how incredibly nervous and incredibly upset he appeared to be, which you can see on tape. We have the tape. And what he started out by doing was comparing all the astronauts, the entire astronaut corps, all his colleagues who landed on the moon, to parrots. He said, and parrots don't fly very well. Parrots also don't tell you the truth. They tell you what they're told. At the end of his speech, he turned to the students, because students represent, of course, the next generation. The perfect photo op. Always plant students in your audience so you make people think you're concerned about the next generation. He looked at them, he kind of calmed down at this point, and he said, there are wonders beyond belief on the moon for those who can remove truth's protective layers. Now, I was never taught in school that truth had protective layers. Who's protecting the truth? He was obviously referring to Brookings, to NASA, to 40 years of lies. Okay, a key prediction. Remember, science is nothing if it's not prediction. A key prediction of the whole lunar dome model, the ancient lunar dome model, that somebody was there, they lived there, they built incredible, extensive stuff. Apollo was sent there to find out what they could bring home with the primitive rocket technology of the 1950s and 60s. We're doing a lot better now, by the way, secretly. And one of the key predictions of the model is that if you have glass domes, glass ruins, people who live in glass houses see prisms. They see stunning arrays of color. And if you lived in a glass house and you looked at the sun or you look at the reflections and all that, you should see prisms over and over and over again. In these photographs, the model says that we should be able to find prisms. So I started looking. And this is a picture from Apollo 17. You can just see a hint. This is one of the newly scanned, leaked images that somebody's putting 16 megabyte files. So anybody out there can go to the web and download them and use Photoshop, and bingo, you'll confirm exactly what is there. If you turn up the gain, right up here, above these mountains, which aren't mountains, by the way, they're old eroded ecologies, you find a prism. You find a stunning color shard of glass, spectrally refracting light. Now, in the model that was raised earlier, that this is all done in a soundstage, because sound stages will be made of steel and aluminum and, you know, things you build out of. We don't build out of glass here because glass is fragile. Glass breaks down. Glass is not steel on Earth. Only on the moon is it 20 times stronger than steel. So this, if I had to bet the farm on one piece of data that we're right, it's these prisms. Because in looking at these photographs and looking at the way the color emulsion of the ectochrome, the super ectochrome that Charlie Wyckoff, my friend who I worked with and used this film for him, developed, I know that those three layers, yellow, magenta, and cyan, when converted into a color ectochrome transparency, were obviously able of recording. Here's another one. This one has a prism going up and a prism going down. It's called birefraction. It's a double refraction. And as you look through, here's a comparison. The one I showed you first, here's the second one. Notice the angle is different. That's because it was taken at a different angle in relation to the sun. So the physics of the refraction, of the formation of the prisms, here's one of my favorites. This is the PR shot. Cernan wearing the commander's stripes with the flag, but if you look up here in the darkness, in the dome that's over Taurus Littrow, and you enlarge it, lo and behold, you find a prism.